for joining us. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. Well, the Federal Executive Council has received a report detailing the growth of the nation's GDP in the third quarter of 2018. After the meeting presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari, the Minister of Budget and National Planning told State House correspondents that the Council is encouraged by the economy's steady recovery from recession. He also notes that the economic growth continues to be driven by the non-oil sector, which grew by 3.32% in the third quarter.
The economy, when measured by real GDP, grew at 1.81% in the third quarter 2018, compared to 1.5% in the second quarter of 2018. The Federal Executive Council was particularly encouraged to note that economic growth continues to be driven by the non-oil sector, which grew by 2.32% in the third quarter. This has been the strongest growth in non-oil GDP in 12 consecutive quarters since the fourth quarter of 2015.
And the Federal Inland Revenue Service is targeting a total of 5.3 trillion naira revenue generation before December 2018. The chairman of the FIRS, Mr. Babatunde Fowler, who was speaking after a meeting with members of the Joint Tax Board in Abuja, however, calls on state governments to grant autonomy to their boards of internal revenue to help reduce overdependence on monthly allocation.
This year, the FIRS, with the support of the presidency and the Ministry of Finance and other stakeholders, has been able to generate 5 trillion. We believe that we should close at least 5.3 trillion, which should be the highest in the history of FIRS. And we believe that with that additional revenue, that the state government and the federal government will be able to provide more services and more development to the people of Nigeria. I think, to my mind, and based on experience, they should grant autonomy to the respective state boards of internal revenue and then give them the challenge, give them the political backing to carry out their functions. And you'll be surprised to find out that states that believe they do not have the capacity do have the potential and have capacity to generate revenue.
Also in the news, the poor remittance by electricity distribution companies to the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC for the energy sold to them has become a serious concern for the regulator of the power sector. The government-owned NBET buys electricity in bulk from generation companies through power purchase agreements and sells to the discos, which then supply to the consumers. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, in its report for the second quarter 2018, says the liquidity challenge in the Nigerian electricity supply industry continues to manifest during the period under review. According to the report, during the second quarter, the discos were issued a total invoice of 161.4 billion naira for energy received from NBET and for the administrative services by the market operators, but only a sum of 53.7 billion naira of the invoice was settled, creating a total deficit of 107.7 billion naira. And barring any last-minute change, Nigeria's first gold refinery is set to be launched today, December the 13th, in Mowe, Ogun State. The launch of the new refinery, which follows its successful completion, comes after the federal government announced the issuance of an operating license to an indigenous mineral and commodities company, Kyan Smith Limited, in October. According to a statement by the company, the refinery will add value to the country's economy, gold miners and traders, and also increase government's revenue at a time of oil price volatility. The Minister of Mines and Steel Development, Mr. Ba Buhari, who is expected at the launch, will be joined by the Ogun State Governor Bikule Amusu and other officials from the public and private sectors. On the global oil scene, OPEC has lowered the 2019 forecast of demand for its crude, underlining the challenge the producer group faces to prevent a glut, even after last week's decision to trim output. The group has also offset a drop in sanctions-hit Iranian oil exports. In its monthly report, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries said 2019 demand for its crude will fall to 31.44 million barrels per day, 100,000 barrels per day less than predicted last month, and 1.53 million less than it currently produces. And worried by a drop in oil prices and rise in supplies, OPEC and its allies, including Russia, last week agreed to return to supply cuts next year. The pledge to lower output by 1.2 million barrels per day, of which OPEC's share is 800,000 barrels per day. OPEC expects global oil demand to slow next year and see little support from the economic backdrop.